What is up, YouTube? Johnny B here again today, and we're going to be bringing you the second video to this series of resurrecting this Evo, basically bringing it back to life because it's been down for over a couple months now before I bought it. So I want to go ahead and give you guys an update to the continuing of working on this Evo. After I compiled the list, I started searching everywhere, prices, all kinds of things, and luckily I found a guy local that had an Evo that was parting out. Turns out he ended up crashing his Evo. It was too expensive to fix the frame, so he stripped it, bought a shell, started putting everything on it basically, but that shell came with a lot of parts, so he had a lot of extra parts, and here we are. I got probably about half of the things on my list, which is amazing, and he hooked me up with a good deal. So let me show you what we got. All right, so starting off, we got a hood. That is probably one of the most important parts. It's a main part. It does have a little bit of damage, but we got it for a really good deal. Normally these hoods are really difficult to find, or if you want to find an aftermarket one, they're like 600 bucks, which is probably about the same for an OEM one. So we wanted to go ahead and stick with OEM parts just because they're more high quality. It's aluminum, so they can get pretty expensive, and I don't even think they make them in the aftermarket. It has a little scuff here and there, but you guys know I'm good with body work and painting, so not an issue for me. And then another thing that he did have was this right here, the engine cover. That was not really necessary, but I think it's always nice to have the engine cover. Got that for a good deal. Also, the lower control arm on the driver's side, definitely needed that because the ball joint actually popped off of the other one, and I think it bent, so we definitely needed that. Next to that, we have a motor mount. This is the motor mount that is on the passenger side. That got all bent up, obviously, from the incident. And then a little bit more to the left, we found fog lights. So it's a pair, and they come with the brackets, mounting hardware to put them on, and the wiring. So that's good because I think the wiring on mine got shot. So that's always a big plus. Then we got a coolant reservoir. We got some vents for the fenders. So whenever I do get the fenders, you know, I'm gonna have the vents for them. Hopefully they don't come with them, because if they do, then I bought them for no reason. But we also got one of the turn signals that was damaged. Then these pieces here are for the hood. So normally they sell these separately, but the guy gave it to me with the hood. That's awesome. And the hinges, really important part when replacing the hood. If you don't replace the hinges, your hood will probably never be straight again. So you need to have some nice undamaged hinges. But the best part about this was that I found the airbags that I needed. These airbags are not cheap whatsoever. Got them for a good deal. This is actually the one for the steering wheel. These things run you anywhere from 400 to 500 bucks. I got it for 200 bucks, so I'm happy with that. This is a side curtain airbag. So it literally deploys on the side, and it literally looks like a curtain, so that's why they call it that, I'm guessing. And then this is an airbag that's underneath the steering wheel. They call it a knee airbag because this literally deploys like right around your shin area to keep your feet safe, I'm guessing, but most of the time they end up ripping your shins. So another thing that is a very essential piece is the bumper reinforcement. The awesome thing about this is that it came complete. It came with the towers, and it also came with some of the ducting and this little foam area for the bumper to protect from impact. So this is definitely something that would be relatively expensive if you try to piece it from Mitsubishi, because every single little piece is separate and it gets really expensive. Another thing that I really needed was this brake line. The brake line on the side of the driver, obviously where the wheel just ripped off, it actually ripped off the brake line too, so needed one of those to make sure that worked out perfectly fine. And then this is part of the core support, the top piece. Mine is all twisted, so I'm gonna have to sand it down and paint that, get it to the correct color. They actually threw in a side skirt for free. I don't know if I'm gonna use it yet because it's kind of beat up. I might just try to find a one in good condition, but I'm probably gonna, you know, I'm gonna sand and paint whichever one I get anyway, so maybe the free one will work for me. Not quite sure yet. Oh, and then another thing that I forgot is that this actually came with the hood latch. So this hood latch and the wire, both of mine got messed up. The hood latch got bent, and then the wire got split in half. Another essential part, very important, are the seat belts. So I got both front seat belts for the passenger and the driver. So that's definitely something you need, trying to get all the safety equipment and stuff back into the car, because obviously if you have an Evo, it's got a lot of power, and if you sell it to some kid, he might crash it. So you want to put all the safety equipment back in. And then this is another main part that I definitely needed. I'm so happy that he had an extra one. This is the subframe. My subframe didn't really get damaged apart from where the A-arm got hit. It actually crinkled this side. It didn't really mess with the subframe much, but I wanted to make sure that I had a perfectly straight subframe to mount, you know, mount the frame to, and to have the engine, because this is where the engine sits on it. So I just wanted to make sure that everything was going to be perfectly straight with no issues. And it also comes with the back motor mount, and then this little beam that goes to the front that bolts onto the frame, and then it has the motor mount for the front. So that's a lot of the pieces down. Another cool thing that I got was that I actually found a company that sells used car parts in Florida that had the whole front frame section, and they're actually going to ship it to me all the way over here. They're literally chopping the strut towers in half and everything forward. They're just going to send me. So that's exactly what I need for the Evo. It's going to be OEM stuff. It's going to be all welded perfectly straight. So literally I'm just going to have to clean this one up, cut it, clean the car, and make sure that all the mounting points are exactly the same, measure, square it up, obviously just tack it first, and then, you know, start putting the body panels to make sure everything's going to be straight. I don't want to weld it all on and then it turns out that the hood isn't sitting properly or the bumper's kind of slanted to the side. I don't want none of that. So I'm going to make sure that before I weld it on, which is obviously going to be stronger than what it has now because from factory they just come spot welded. So I'm literally going to do a full weld on the parts that I cut, and then I'll probably end up stitch welding most of the things just so it reinforces everything. Probably put a couple plates here and there, and it's literally going to be stronger than OEM because this is what they do when they make them into rally cars. They'll go ahead and stitch weld most of the chassis or full weld, because normally they are just spot welded. So spot weldings, they're good for production cars that you're just going to use on the road, but once you're going to start taking them off-road or abuse them or something, that rips apart. So I'll make it stronger than OEM. Believe that. So don't worry about the car being sketchy or whatever. It's going to be as perfect as I can get it, and it's going to be a little bit stronger than OEM because I'm going to add extra stuff. All right, so this piece right here showed up a couple days later. It came all the way from Florida, and I was fortunate enough to find it cut exactly where I needed it. As you guys can see, these here are the strut towers. They actually cut from there forward, which is everything that I needed. I had to chop off. I chopped it off a little bit, like around this area, to where I had, you know, maybe 2-3 inches more that I need. I actually cut off the car, so it was perfectly fine. These things usually come in lots of different pieces. I ended up going to Mitsubishi to go ask how much everything costed. This little piece right here alone was $200, and then these were like 70 bucks. Everything was just really expensive. This inner piece of the frame rail was like $300, and then another $200 from the outside of the frame rail. So in total, this piece right here would have cost me like $1,400 from the dealership brand new. And then it would have made it difficult to kind of line up everything because everything's spot welded. I would have had to buy everything separately. So this was actually the best option for me because it's literally chopped right off of another Evo and it's in perfect conditions. There's no bends or nothing. So when I go ahead and put it on my Evo, it's gonna be perfectly straight with all the correct dimensions. The only thing I need to do is when I chop this one, obviously I need to match it to where I chopped the other one to make it easy. So I figured out what I'm doing over there. Now that I know what I'm working with, I'm gonna go ahead and chop it where it is spot welded. Like for example, here on the strut tower, where this ends, this piece right here is completely spot welded. So I'm gonna end up chopping it here just like I did on the Evo. And instead of having spot welds on these two different pieces of metal, I'm actually gonna just go ahead and lay a full bead of weld, making it even more rigid than it actually was from factory. So most of these pieces are actually, all of them are spot welded. Okay, so you guys saw that the frame piece that we got goes actually to half of the strut tower. So we're gonna go ahead and remove these spot welds here from this little section, which is still a little bit bent up right around this area. So I'm gonna end up chopping it here, which is what we have on the actual frame piece that we bought. Remove these spot welds so I can go ahead and chop off this little piece of metal here, obviously leaving the strut tower intact. And if you look at the cut that I made here, I made it right alongside where the spot welds are at. So I'm gonna have to do the same thing with that one and then just go ahead and weld this all up together. You know, all these pieces, they're all separate and they're all spot welded. So we're gonna go ahead and reincorporate them back into the car with the new ones. Obviously removing all the ones that are bent, essentially bringing the car back to factory specs and actually a little bit stronger. But at the same time, everything's gonna help me line up because all of these factory cuts, all these little lines here that we see, everything's gonna line up with the frame piece that we bought, including all the way down to the frame rails. So that's gonna essentially help me make sure that everything is perfectly straight. Obviously, I'm gonna go ahead and square it up. I'm gonna measure the front of one corner to the back of the Evo on another corner, you know, in diagonal. That way I can get proper measurements and make sure that they're exactly the same. I don't want it to be off a little bit because then fenders, hood, bumper, none of that stuff will line up. So that is the main purpose. So let's go ahead and continue removing this. Okay, so now I went ahead and mocked it up. What I ended up doing is obviously I cut the same area that I cut on the original car. I cut it on the front clip basically just to get it all to line up properly. And then I went ahead and clamped it on. And this piece here, I actually cut it off the fender that was for the passenger side just to make sure that my clearances were correct and that if I were to weld it up, that the fender would actually bolt on into its original place. And now we're gonna go ahead and make sure that everything is leveled and take some measurements to make sure that they are even on both sides. Go. Okay, so now after I got everything lined up where I want it, you can see the frame rail, same exact height, even the face of it all is pretty even. So I didn't want it to move from the spot, so I just went ahead and tacked it a little bit just to make sure that it's not gonna get out of the way or mess up somehow. So let's go ahead and do the other side also. And here is the other side. This is the driver's side frame rail. As you can tell, it all lines up pretty nicely. Went ahead and tacked it down here also. I still have to chop off some of this excess metal here just because I have it on the other actual part of the frame. So I'm just gonna go ahead and chop this off also and weld that all up. But my main concern was to get the frame rails to line up perfectly. Okay, so after I tacked it, obviously we had already all the measurements checked out, and I went ahead and just welded this side of the frame rail. You can see it lines up perfectly with the bottom, even all the little shapes and indents, they all line up perfectly. So that was pretty awesome that I literally chopped off exactly what I needed on both of the pieces and they lined up almost perfect. It was pretty awesome that happened because most of the times I still need to go ahead and chop off a little bit excess or something like that. But nope, this one actually went on perfectly. Also did the other side. So now it's actually coming along pretty nicely. Okay, so after I went ahead and mocked it up and I went ahead and tacked it, I was kind of happy with it. But before I started welding, I wanted to make sure that everything was level, that all the measurements worked out. So one of the things that I did was I started putting the level on everything. So first I put it on the frame rail just to make sure that was level. Obviously what I did end up doing was adjust the lift so that everything, the actual car itself was perfectly level. That way when I compared it to the actual piece that we put on, or that we're gonna put on completely, that would be level also. So the frame rail was level, the front section where the core support, where the radiator sits and all that was perfectly level also. And then where the reinforcement bar for the front bumper sits, wanted to make sure that was also leveled. And then we measured some of the sections where the bottom part of the fender bolts onto, and everything was level. So I was pretty happy how it turned out. Obviously I wanted to make sure that the level from one side of the car to the other side of the car with this piece was also going to be level, and that all worked out perfectly. So as long as you go ahead and do, you know, all your measurements correctly, you make sure that everything's level, then you can basically go ahead and just weld it all together. So this was the point that I wanted to go ahead and weld first, just because I wanted the frame rails to be perfectly lined up with each other, because I knew that after that everything else was going to need to be adjusted a little bit, just because when I cut, obviously some parts got bended here and there. There's obviously still some little gaps that I need to adjust, but we are good to go because the frame rails all lined up perfectly. And since I chopped from here forward, all this section back here was actually in perfect conditions. I couldn't find any areas where there was small kinks, paint peeling off, nothing like that. And then the awesome part is that even though you may think that, oh, this part's not gonna be strong anymore, what if you're driving and then the front frame falls off because Johnny didn't know how to weld or something dumb like that? There is no need to be afraid, because from here back is where the subframe sits, and the subframe holds the steering rack, your lower control arm for your wheels, and then on top of it, the actual strut tower is still the original strut tower. So all the original points on the back side of it are still, you know, fully put on like they came from factory, and that's where the strut mounts. So our whole wheel assembly is essentially still sitting on factory components. The only thing that this front section actually holds is obviously like the front part of the fenders, the bumpers, and it has the spots where the motor mount sits. So that's why I needed to go ahead and fully weld it, just because this is where the motor is actually going to be held on to. But on the front subframe, the rear part of the engine actually bolts onto a motor mount right here. This is the rear motor mount for the engine. So if you follow this front section bar here, this is the front motor mount. So most of the engine is also being held on by the actual frame, but also on the subframe. So there's no actual tension on this apart from holding the engine. Most of the tension is where the subframe area is, this part of the frame rail and back, which is still factory. It's still connected on its factory points, so it's still going to be just as strong as it was from factory. So there's no need to fear, you know, for safety issues or anything like that. And then plus, with everything fully welded, where it's normally just spot welded, it's going to give it a little bit more rigidity. All right, guys, we're going to end the episode here. If you guys want to continue seeing the progress on the Evo Resurrection, make sure you go ahead and hit the subscribe button for more updates on this. I'm going to try to knock this Evo out as fast as I can, just so that I can be driving it. You know, I want to drive it already, so that's why I've been working on it for, you know, all week. Haven't really been working on it just on weekends. I've actually been working on it through the week. That's why you got some GoPro footage, you got some DSLR footage, all kinds, everything mixed in. But it's all to show you guys the progress of the actual resurrection of the Evo. So make sure you subscribe again. That way you can get notifications, you know, for the videos when they come out. And that way you can stay updated on seeing this thing come back to life. And as always, you guys have a great day.